Welcome to episode 78 of Pull Up with Myles and Owen. Today, we are joined by the record holder for appearances on the show, our dear friend Terrika Foster-Brasby, who joined us for a great conversation about a great but also bittersweet conversation about the relocation of the Connecticut Sun to Houston. The Sun will be playing their final season in Connecticut in 2026 and then moving to Houston in 2027. The Houston Comets, of course, won the first 4 WNBA titles. Now they will return to the league. And yeah, we just want to thank T for sharing stories of the Sun with us. She has so much great behind the scenes information, has built so many amazing relationships with and around this organization, but also just for the fun stuff too, because every time we've had T on the pod, it's just a whole bunch of laughter and great storytelling and great vibes. So we're very excited to share this episode with you. Let's do it. What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 78 of Pull Up with Myles and Owen. Today, we welcome a very special guest back to the podcast. She might have guested on like half of the episodes of this show at this point. Like, definitely holds the record. Our dear friend, she is a women's basketball analyst, a sideline reporter for the Connecticut Sun, hosts the phenomenal podcast Levels to This alongside Cheryl Swoops. Terrika Foster-Brasby, thank you so much for joining us. You were just talking about, how much you're happy to have the Yankees back, all this. So I just wanted to thank you for joining us during such an exciting time.
It's so interesting that you and I have two very different recollections of how that conversation went, because there's by no means would I ever be excited about the Yankees returning back to baseball. But I'm going to let you cook, Owen.
We shouldn't start this with taking digs at your baseball fandom, being that you agreed to come on this pod, even though you are going out to the Final Four tomorrow, a day early, so that you can see your Detroit Tigers playing in Arizona. So we shouldn't start there, especially because this is going to be a little bit heavy for you specifically, because we're going to be talking about the sale of the Connecticut Sun. So I think that just to set the stage, news broke on Friday, March 27th, that the Connecticut Sun would be moving to Houston and rebranding as the Houston Comets. You and Cheryl put out a great pod in conversation with team president Jen Rosati, and then I know you got to speak to her again in a closed presser. Mm-hmm. What were your main takeaways from this sale that you really, obviously in the wake of all the CBA news and the tournament and the handful of drafts that we have to deal with in the next couple of weeks, what were your main takeaways from that conversation that you just don't think have been really explored or talked about so much on socials so far?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I really do want to say thanks for having me, guys. I love coming on the show. And secondly, I will say that I am going to have my resume posted at the end of the show, because clearly I'm going to need a job in 2027. So there's that. But in all seriousness, I've had a lot of time to grapple with this, and I'm going to answer your question, Myles, but I just want to kind of set the tone that I've had a lot of time to grapple with this, because the rumors about this particular sale had been swirling since maybe last year, June 2025. And because there was conversation between Boston, between Hartford, and then much later comes Houston, nothing ever changed the fact that this team was going to be sold. It was the who it would be sold to. And so with that, you have to, kind of think as a reporter, whoever owns this team doesn't necessarily have to make you their reporter, whether that's Boston, whether that's Hartford, or whether that's Houston. So I've had a lot of time to kind of come to deals with it. And so because of that, I'm in a much better place to have this conversation than I think some people realize, because I've had time to deal with it. For others, including the fans, this is incredibly fresh. This is coming to smack them in the face at this point. And so I think Jennifer Rosati realizes that being on the back end, there's been time to kind of deal with this and come to terms with what this means. But understanding that to the public, and especially to the fans in this area, this is something brand new that they're going to struggle dealing with. And it's going to be devastating for them. And so over the last couple of days, the conversation has been one, that understanding that the team was doing this for the best interest of the players. With the CBA news that just recently broke, some of the requirements that they have for facilities and examples were things that just Mohegan Sun was just not going to be able to provide, right? And I don't think that that's something that's new, given that we've heard Alyssa Thomas over the last couple of years when she was with the team talk about the facilities. You have seen the reports about the team not being able to practice because they share a practice facility with a community event. And if that event takes precedent, they have to shorten their practices. So all of these things played a role into why it was important for the Mohegan Sun tribe to even consider a sale in the first place, to investigate a sale in the first place. Excuse me. So those conversations were something that I think haven't really been pushed to the forefront, that it wasn't just the tribe wanting to just get rid of the team. It was the tribe recognizing that there were some things that the teams were going to need that they just could not provide. And they wanted to get the team in a better position to have those things provided for them. I think the second thing is that a lot of this was conversations that happened that didn't include a lot of front office members. So Jennifer Rosati was very much present for the CBA, but not so much in a lot of the decision making for the tribe and what it is that they wanted to do. These are ownership decisions. She's not an owner. She's a team president, but she is not an owner. And so some of the questions that we have regarding why people chose Boston over Hartford, or, why they didn't pay a relocation fee, those aren't things that Jennifer can answer. Those are things that the Mohegan Sun tribe would need to answer. So I just think it's important to note that we direct the right questions and the right things to the right people. It, unfortunately, as much as we want to know those things, Jen just isn't the right person to give us those answers. The last thing I'll say is that they have definitely framed this season to be a season of celebration. And so this is something that they are looking forward to sharing. There are some players that they want to honor and highlight. They want to make sure that the Connecticut Sun's history remains Connecticut Sun's history. And they're looking to do a bunch of things and really just encouraging the fans to not take away from the players, even though you feel disheartened and heartbroken that your team is leaving, to still put the players at the center of attention.
I mean, that's a perfect transition to our next question, which was, you mentioned the bids from Boston, from Hartford, or from groups that were looking to move the team to those two locations. What is lost by moving this team out of the region? Because there is a deep appetite and hunger for women's basketball in this region, and now you're kind of taking that away.
100%. Like this region has owned women's basketball for a very long time, even before there was a Connecticut Sun team brought here 23 years ago. I mean, the University of Connecticut plays basketball here, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but they've kind of had a really great streak as of late, right?
They're all right.
I mean, they cool. They straight. They might got like 12 championships assigned. I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, women's basketball fans here are die hard. They are serious. And so when you think about the league in general, even before the Connecticut Sun was in Connecticut, women's basketball fans in this state were supporters of the WNBA because they were supporters of the Yukon Huskies. So if you were a Husky, no matter where you went, you got support. Liberty fans grew up here because Rebecca Lobo was one of the originators in the league. Then you get Sue Bird, who goes to Seattle. And then you get all these things that happen. And finally, the Connecticut Sun take over the Orlando Miracle and bring a team here. And these fans not only have been loyal to the team here and loyal to the sport, but even the fact that independent ownership didn't truly exist in the WNBA until the Mohegan Sun tribe brought that team here. For the rest of the teams, they were associated with ownership of the NBA. So it's not just simply taking a team away from here, but it's also understanding the gravity of how this region held down the WNBA for several years. There were times where nobody wanted to host an NBA All-Star game, and Connecticut said, "Don't worry about it. We'll do it because we own our building, because we have it here, because we can handle it." So I think those are things that we don't want to get lost. And I feel like the fans here in this community feels like those things will absolutely get lost. There isn't really any sports in Connecticut outside of UConn. There's the Hartford Athletics, Hartford Yard Goats, the Wolf Pack. So these are like AA minor league teams for NHL and MLB and the soccer team. But major sports here, you either have to go to New York or you got to go to Boston. And Connecticut, the Sun was that one thing that they could claim as their own. And now they feel like they've lost that.
There's a lot that I love from that answer and just how important this is to New England. But I want to kind of focus in on what you were saying about the Tribe. And that's such an important point, that the independent ownership really ushered in an era for the W when it was at its lowest, when those NBA teams were divesting. And now they're all coming back because the profit's there and the investment seems like it's a sure thing. The league might not be here today without the Connecticut Sun and the Mohegan Tribe and that era that they brought about. And yes, those were the lean years, and that was why they were able to hang for so long, is because yes, they're not backed by the same billionaires that are backing a lot of the teams that we're seeing with the state-of-the-art facilities and a lot of the stuff that the players rightly negotiated for in this last CBA. And part of that is respect to them for recognizing that they're
Right.
priced out now, and that this is a move that had to be made for the continued growth. And obviously with a great return, it maybe not the maximum return based on what we've heard about what the other bids potentially could have been, but in terms of what they bought into and what they're leaving with.
Yeah.
But I think it's getting like a little bit lost, because for years it has been kind of a punchline, right? The players themselves have talked about the facilities or the lack thereof when you're in these giant playoff games, for example, and you have to share practice time or practice court with a birthday party. That was a big story that came out a couple of years ago. Or just every time a major free agent leaves, and we saw that with JJ, we saw that with AT. It's a constant conversation. So this had to happen.
It did, but I want to add something to that too, because when you talk about the lack of what Connecticut has from a facility standpoint, one thing they didn't lack support. They didn't lack grit, and they didn't lack the ability to still win. I mean, this is one of the smallest markets, if not the smallest market in the WNBA. And yet I'd say from at least 2019 through last year, this was one of the teams that you said, if it's no other team I know that's going to the WNBA playoffs, it's Connecticut. If there's a team that I'm putting in the conversation for a championship, it's Connecticut. They built stars here. They built MVPs here. They built coaches of the years here. MIPs, several here. We've had, and I say we, but Connecticut has had a Lindsay Whalen suit up for them, a Asia Jones, a Tina Charles, a Rebecca Lobo at some point. Like, this hasn't been a place. A Chinea Gumake, first round overall pick, right? Alyssa Thomas, currently one of the top 3 players in the WNBA. And so you look at the things that Connecticut didn't have, and you say, in spite of not having some of the state-of-the-art facilities and some of the, some of the attractions surrounded Mohegan Sun that these other places have, they still were a formidable and competitive team for a lot of the seasons that they were here. And I think that just goes to the support that they had from other things other than just the facilities.
Mm-hmm. And that speaks to just that this was always a good product for the fans. And that's something that I feel like can get lost when we are just looking at it through one prism. Through we just spoke with Natalie for this last week, and we talked about how tiring it is that everything is being looked at when it comes to CBA talk about money. And there's so much more to this sport than that. And in terms of building out that community, that was a large success for this organization in its entirety.
Yeah.
It's still also undeniable, to your point, T, that this team, maybe other than the Aces, for the last 8-9 years, they've been the most successful team, I would say. Just because they didn't win the championship, they have had more consistent success than even some of the teams that did win the championship in that span. The Mystics won in 2019, but then they had a real, downswing and rebuild. The Liberty had that 2-20 season, had to build up to winning the title. The Lynx, have been fairly consistent, but have had years where they're kind of mediocre. Connecticut was like top 4 seed every year, making the finals every other year. If they weren't making the finals, they're making the semis. That's really hard to do. And again, I think that, in the kind of binary nature that we sometimes discuss and debate sports these days in the social media era, it gets lost when a team doesn't win the championship. Everyone's just like, throw it away. But the Memphis Grizzlies in the mid 2010s, there's a lot of teams that people look back on really fondly that never won a championship. And I think the Sun for me are that. Do you think, and this is kind of a tricky one, because there was a lot of discussion surrounding or I guess confusion from fans and even from media about why Houston, which I think everyone agrees should have a team. This is a team that won the first 4 WNBA championships, that has legends upon legends who played for them, even though they were only around for about a decade. Why did the WNBA not, and the obvious answer here seems to me to be money, but I'm curious your take. Why did the WNBA not use one of the expansion spots for Houston, relocate the Sun in the region? Is that all politics? And feel free to just say pass, because I know it's a tricky one to talk about.
Now, Owen, would I ever miss an opportunity to talk shit on Absolutely not.
That's why I'm playing the point guard right here. I'm Alyssa Thomas. I'm looking for everyone in transition.
I can't wait to clip that to use in our group chat once a week.
Yes, and I am taking the oop. Okay, trust me, I'm catching the oop. I mean, obviously, and I want to preface this for anyone listening to say this is not an official report. This is just Terrika giving her thoughts and opinions personally on what she thinks, but this is not an official report. But what was an official report was that there were some elements that the WNBA was looking for, and specifically the relocation element, because the WNBA says that they only make decisions, that they are the only ones authorized to make decisions on a relocation. The fact that Hartford and Boston wanted to move the team from Uncasville, Connecticut. And to be clear, Uncasville, Connecticut is 43 miles from Hartford. Takes about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic.
You're familiar.
Ask me how I know. So we're talking about a 45-minute drive here, people. But they consider that a relocation. And they expected us, the people out here on the outside, to completely forget about the fact that we read the articles that stated that it's specific to the Hartford group. They actually wanted to keep the Mohegan Sun tribe as a minority owner, that they would split the time that they would play between Hartford and Mohegan Sun, that the West Hartford community was open to them building a practice facility, that the brand new apartments that are downtown Hartford would have been transformed into player housing. They expected us to forget all of that. So I'm confused when you say that they wanted to relocate. Actually, how is that any different than Connecticut deciding to play a game or two in Boston at TD Garden? How is that any different than any other team that decides to play a game or two at a larger arena? That doesn't mean that they've relocated, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have changed ownership in any way, but they have decided to play a game in different places. How many games that is, I don't know if there's a rule that exists, but I ain't never seen one that says you have to play so many games in this arena in order to be considered relocated. So I think it's quite interesting that that's the rationale that was given. You can make that argument with Boston, but it's very difficult to make that argument with the Hartford group. I think the second thing that they expect us to forget, and maybe that's because people weren't there, but I was sitting in the back row on the first seat in June of 2025 when it was announced that Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia would be receiving a team. And during that announcement, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert specifically said there were other teams that were very adamant about wanting to be awarded a team, one of which was Houston. Ain't nobody asked about Houston. Anybody asked you to name no teams at all. But you found it particularly obvious that you needed to say that Houston and go into reason why Houston was a great team for a bid, but just lost out this time. Okay, so those are two things that are sticking in my mind. And then as we continue to further the conversation, Houston becomes more and more relevant in this conversation, the more that they become excuses as to why Boston and Hartford can't have a team. You can't relocate. Well, Hartford never put in for expansion. Why would Hartford, 43 miles away, put in for an expansion team when the team is up the street? Like, do you really believe that that Connecticut, that New England can sustain two teams? And then last but not least, as we're putting all of this together, we're trying to understand why expansion has anything to do with the ability to sell a team in the first place. Two completely different conversations, two completely different any and everything. Like, wanting to move a team is very different than just simply saying, I want to buy a team. And an owner should have the ability to sell to whomever it is that they desire to sell to. And once that team has taken over, if they desire to move the team, then that's a conversation that should be had. But I feel like all of these things have built up to the culmination that Houston was never out of the question. It just needed its moment to continue to make its way to the forefront. And the more that these other barriers were put in front of why Boston and why Hartford groups could not be successful in purchasing, the more it cleared the path for Houston, the team that Kathy Engelbert said during her announcement was next in line after Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia. It made sense. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just saying, if you read between the lines, it was there all along.
It's 2026. All these conspiracies feel like they're coming true. So we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but there's a lot going on in the world right now. Let's shift real quick. You've been on this program now 4 times, which is you are the leader in the clubhouse. And that means that a lot of our listeners know your story because we've probed you on it and asked you 1,000 different ways. But something we really haven't talked about is your start as a sideline reporter with Connecticut. And that is such an important thing for you and such a large goal for you was to have that position. How did that all come to be? And can you just walk us through, that moment for you when you got that call?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. I never realized that I never talked about that before. So yeah, at the time I was working at ESPN. I was a social media specialist and I built a really great relationship with Connecticut just through social media. I grew up in Detroit. I was a huge Detroit Shock fan when the WNBA started in 96, 97. And I know what the Connecticut fans feel because my team relocated to Tulsa, which then relocated to Dallas and became the Dallas Wings. And disclaimer, that was the point where I could no longer support. So I was here for Tulsa, couldn't do it for Dallas.
It's not the first time you've seen a team pack their bags for Texas.
I'm telling you, right? It's crazy. So with that being said, I moved to Connecticut and I just kind of gravitate. Women's basketball was it, right? And so quite naturally, I gravitated to the team that was here. And it wasn't anything that I intended to do. I feel like I just became a fan of the team just because I became a fan of women's basketball and it was easily accessible. So I became a fan. And throughout that process of working at ESPN, I was co-hosting the Around the Rim podcast. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to meet some front office staff and front office people. I ended up meeting Amber Cox, who at the time was the executive vice president for the Connecticut Sun. And this was around 2019. We had a conversation and she talked about what were some of my goals. And I told her ultimately one of my goals would to be a sideline reporter, journalist and being able to get more into broadcast journalism. But it's a little tough to do that because there aren't many opportunities if you don't have experience already. Fast forward to 2021, we're in a pandemic. And during that pandemic, there were different protocols that were in place at different arenas. And so people were getting sick, people were needing time away. And Connecticut was like, we really need an in-arena host. And one of the game managers at the time, his name is Kip. Kip again saw me on social media, knew that I was one of the big fans, and said, Terrika, well, how would you like to be the in-arena host for a game? I was like, what? Loved it. So I did it. He loved it. Now, granted, it's COVID, so we're relegated to one area on like the very top floor. I'm looking down the way.
I've sat up there. That's a high vantage.
It is high up there. Like we are at the top. We are nowhere near the court. I'm actually right next to the DJ. So it's like me and the DJ, and we masked up. I could only take my mask off to talk, and then we're back on. And down the other end, I can see Brendan Glasheen and Kim Adams, because they were doing play-by-play and game analyst at the time. And like we're it. Like nobody else is even really in the building for real, because it's COVID. But we gotta make it seem like we wild in here, right? And so it was the greatest thing, and I loved it. And they asked me to come back, So I did it a few times. And throughout this relationship that I'm building, Amber Cox transitions, and then comes in Amy Shear. Robin, who was the actual sideline reporter and digital presence for the Connecticut Sun, gets a job with the Phoenix Mercury. And so she's like, there's a spot open, Terrika. You should talk to the Sun about getting it. I call the Sun. I talk to Amy, and Amy says, Terrika, I've heard so much about you. Amber, who I just had a conversation with a year before, told me so much about you, and I've been following you, and I love your content, and I love what you do. And I am one who wants to always give up-and-coming young women an opportunity. And so there's no need for me to put out a search for our sideline reporter. If you want it, I want to give it to you. And I said, bitch, do I want it? And that's literally, I didn't have to audition. They didn't ask me to talk to anybody. It was just the relationship that I had. They knew that I was really well versed on the WNBA, and they took a chance. And I said yes, and I had no experience, and I was calling people left and right. Girl, how I do this? What am I supposed to say again? Like, I think I got it, but I'm not sure if I got it. And I have to give a big shout out to David Aldrich at the NBA. He contacted me immediately and was like, Terrika, you're ready for this. This is how you do it. LaChina Robinson, Cindy Brunson. So many people were like, you got this. You can do it. Here's some tips. Zora was very supportive. And literally, my first game, I was a nervous wreck, but the rest is history. And so I have a really special place in my heart for Connecticut, because I wouldn't be where I am and doing what I'm doing if not for them just simply saying, we believe in you, we trust you, and we know that you love our team, and we think that you'll do right by our team. And they've never once criticized me for criticizing them. They understand that I'm a professional, and as much as I might love the team, right is right, wrong is wrong. You know, if you play well, you play well. If you don't, you don't. And I'm going to tell you, you stink if you stink. And it's just that simple. But I appreciate them for giving me that opportunity.
I feel like in this last year especially, I guess the last couple of years, Awful Announcing puts out their favorite crews for the WNBA, and they rank them. You guys sitting at number one, and it feels like it's a pretty universal thing in a space where nobody agrees on anything. It's that everyone loves the broadcast team for the Connecticut Sun. And that is all incredible. And obviously, like, we know Brendan especially pretty well too. But it's such a difficult job to me from the outside, knowing how tight these windows are and how tired these players are, and how nobody wants to talk to us after a game. I can't imagine we tried to talk to somebody after the first quarter or at halftime or something like that. You do such a great job. And that's a testament to, as you said, for getting that job, to the relationship building that you do. You are just one of the warmest and kindest and most genuine people. And I think that that's what resonates the most, especially with these players. Like, they can sniff bullshit from a mile away. They're answering the same question 15 times a day. So if you're not going to come correct, if you're not going to be there every day, you're not going to get that soundbite that time from them. What are some of your favorite interactions that you've had with Sun players, or even, I know you've spoken to players on the other team before too, in those tight sideline windows?
That's a great question. I definitely got to say the chest bump from Courtney Williams. She
Yes.
she was not a member of the Connecticut Sun at that time. She was playing for Minnesota, but Courtney, my girl, and I think like that it's just that. Like, I don't ever want to insult these women by asking them questions that are nonsensical questions, and I definitely will never not be true to myself, right? And so and then getting to know players, so you know who you can speak to and who you can't, and when you can't. So when the producer's like, "Hey, yo, at first quarter we getting AT," no, we not getting AT. Who about to go and talk to AT in the first quarter? It ain't me. You come down here and talk to AT. I'm not. That's crazy. So. And they get that, so it's the respecting of that factor. And to that point, I think another one of my best interviews was AT, because AT gives the best political answers, right? You got to really like know her for her to give you like the real. And this one particular post game, she was like, "Listen, I'm averaging a triple double every day. You know, like I'm out here doing it, and they see it. They just not." And I'm like, "Yes, AT, go off, like go off, right?" So I love that. I think another fun interview that I did was this past season. I'm talking to Tina Charles, and Ryan Howard just comes out of nowhere, jumps on her back, damn near knocks me out the way. And I'm just like, "Tina, what are we doing here?" And it's just the camaraderie between them was a lot of fun. There was an interview once that I had with Asia Wilson where neither of us knew that the camera was on. And so like I could hear Brendan still breaking down the end of the game in my ear. So we're assuming that the TV is like showing a play or something from the last game. Come to find out, the camera was very much on Asia and I. And Asia's talking about my boots, child. Asia's like, "Girl, that boots is cute. Okay, boots." I said, "I know, girl, these are my favorite." Mind you, the camera's rolling the whole time. And so I then hear in my ear, "We're going to toss it out to Terrika." I instantly go in interview mode, but nevertheless, Twitter's already on it, and I'm already tagged in all these videos of people talking about me and Asia talking about these boots. And so it's things like that I absolutely love, because they are not afraid to be their authentic selves with me, and I will 100% always be my authentic self with them. And that relationship, I think, is what helps when it comes to doing these interviews.
I love that so much. It's also like, what a dream to have Asia Wilson complimenting your boots just have been recorded and broadcast to the world by mistake.
Right?
It's glorious.
Great endorsement. Great
Yeah.
endorsement.
Great endorsement. Like, I now have style. Thank you, Asia. Okay. It's the best. It really is the best feeling, y'all. Like, it's because you're outside. Like, I don't have to always talk to players about basketball. You know, like, I want to know how your family's doing, and not even like on just like being like extra, trying to like, so that they know that I'm trying to get the story. It's, if I know that you're into something and I just so happen to be into it too, then like, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. When I see all that NCAA tournament, like, I'm not running up on you like you are the greatest basketball player in the world. I'm trying to figure out where we going to have a drink afterwards, because that's where, like, that's the fun. Like, and I think it's also building trust, right? When you're able to have relationships outside of, and it's not about friends. Like, some people think like, "Oh, you're trying to be friends with the players or whatever." It's really not about friends, but it's about building trust. There's no reporter that's ever been good and they have not built a relationship or built trust with a source, with an athlete or whomever. And so everybody knows my rule. Once alcohol is out, everything is off the record. I can't remember nothing I did if I'm drinking. So I certainly am not trying to keep up with you and what you're doing when you're drinking. So alcohol is out. Everything's off the record. And I think just that trust in knowing that I'm never going to tell an inaccurate story about you. I'm never going to put you in a bad position. I'm never going to try to play gotcha. Like, that's not what we're doing. It's literally about being accurate, being fair, and telling the stories that other people won't tell.
Yeah. I've lost track of how many times I've attributed to you and taken that line, "Drink in the hand, everything's off the record," because it is such a good rule. And you'll see people immediately just like relax. And
Yes.
I think that that's really, really helpful. T, thank you always for taking the time. We know that we're bugging you all day. You're bugging us all day. So this is just putting it on video. Otherwise, this is just what the group chat looks like all the time. But you are the absolute best. And I know that the Connecticut Sun are going to get the perfect farewell sunsetting, if you will, because you're going to be at the forefront helping to share those stories. And you're the best. So thanks
so much, guys. I thank you for having me. Thanks for bringing this conversation to the forefront. It's an important one to have. Fans, don't be sad. And for other fans that are out there listening, please don't not come to the games because you're mad or you're upset with ownership. Like, these players do not deserve to play in front of a half-empty arena or anything like that, because they just don't deserve that, right? So come out, celebrate them, show your appreciation for them, and let that be the lasting memory that you and them have about playing in Connecticut. And I think the final thing I'll say before I leave Myles and Owen is, you can bet that there will be tons of shenanigans this season, because what you gonna do, fire me? Hello. I mean, what are we doing? It is what it is at this point, friends.
That's a mic drop. Oh.
Thank you, T.
Bye, guys.
That's it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening to Pull Up with Myles and Owen. We are so grateful for every time y'all download, like, subscribe to our YouTube channel or to our show on all the various podcast platforms. And if you want even more from us, please subscribe to our Patreon page, Step Back with Myles and Owen, for some very exciting bonus content. We got uncut interviews with players, in-depth analysis of everything women's basketball. Go check it out.
You can follow Pull Up with Myles and Owen and leave a rating and a review for us on your podcast player of choice, and follow the podcast on Instagram at Pull Up with Myles and Owen, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, which Owen just mentioned, at Pull Up with Myles and Owen. And you can follow me on Twitter at Myles Ehrlich.
You can follow me on Twitter at Owen Pence. We will see you next week.
Pull Up with Myles and Owen is hosted by Myles Ehrlich and Owen Pence. This episode was written and produced by Myles Ehrlich, Owen Pence, Molly Socha, and Kevin Kdot Lewis. Molly Socha is our executive producer.